Howdy folks, Kevin here. In this video we're going to be looking at Puppeteer, what it is and how it works, along with going through a brief example of how you can use it to automate form submission. Puppeteer is a NodeJS library that allows you to control Chrome or Chromium, whichever you prefer. It'll run headless. That means that it won't actually show the browser when it's running. It'll just kind of run behind the scenes. But you can run it full where you actually can see the browser. That can be useful for debugging purposes. We'll get into that in just a minute. It can be used to create screenshots and PDFs of pages. Useful if you need to do some quick scraping of websites. Also for form submission or UI testing. We're going to use it today for form submission. You can also take advantage of its DevTools integration for performance issues if you want to do performance testing. And you can use it to test Chrome extensions, which is actually something that I'd like to take more of a look into, because I've been asked about that as far as WebDriver IO goes, if you can use it to test Chrome extensions. But off the top of my mind, I feel like Puppeteer would work a lot better for testing that because it's so deeply integrated into Chrome. Now, with all that said, I'd like to get started on this video's topic, which is to write a script which will do a form submission process for a website that I use on a fairly regular basis to record rainfall at my house. Now, this website is called Kokoraz. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. I could be completely wrong. But it's a nationwide, maybe even looks like that goes into Canada as well. So mostly North American-wide network of individuals working to submit rainfall at their houses. And they use a pretty cool little rain gauge that's all scientific and stuff. And if we zoom into Texas, which is where I'm located at the time being, you can see these are all the reports that come in. Bexar County, which is my specific county that I live in, has recently gotten a fair amount of rain last night. Some storms blew through and looks like anywhere from half an inch to a full inch. Even out west, we got 4.5 inches, which is a fair amount of rain. They probably got a little bit of flash flooding there. And then over here, we also got some rain. So I get too fascinated by this stuff. But the whole purpose of this is just to track rainfall across a large area of land so we can get a better picture from a scientific perspective of how much rainfall has fallen, how current conditions are, all sorts of important data that meteorologists use. And not just meteorologists, but people who deal with concerns around drought, around flooding, all that kind of stuff. It's really helpful to know from a broad perspective what actual rainfall is looking like and what impact that has for future predictions and things like that. So what does this have to do with Puppeteer? Well, every day you need to submit a report of how much rainfall you got for the previous 24 hours. And you do that through this data entry form. So you'll go in, you'll click, and then you'll enter your username and password, and then hit login. You'll save your login if you want to, and then you'll get a form that shows your daily precipitation report. You can change when you report the time, the date. Most importantly, you want to set the amount of rain you received. You can also track snowfall, and get pretty specific if you see any flooding or things like that. But the main thing we want to track is this rainfall. Now, going into this doesn't take too much time. I've got it set up to where I can pretty easily click the bookmark, come in, it takes me directly to this page. If I need to change the time, I can, but then I say, well, let's see, last night I got half an inch of rain, so I hit submit, and that saves my data for the day, and I'm pretty much done. All this is to say that I may not be saving a whole lot of time writing this script, but it does make for a pretty good example of how you can use Puppeteer for something a little bit more complex. This just kind of keeps things pretty basic. I don't have to jump through too many hoops to make things work, but there are definitely some things that I need to work around that would apply for any sort of script that you write with Puppeteer. So we're going to go through that in just a minute. But before we start writing our script, we need to get Puppeteer installed and running. So I'm going to open a terminal window, and I'm going to create a new directory. I'll call it rain puppet just for fun. Then I'll go into that directory and run my npm init command. This will create a package.json file that I can use for storing dependencies, which I will now install my dependency, which is Puppeteer. Do make sure you get that spelling right. There's been some security issues in npm where if you misspell it, you may download a malicious package. They've done some work to kind of avoid that, but it is definitely a concern to watch out for with the spelling. With this install, you can see it did download Chromium, which is used to run the scripts. Chromium is a Chrome-like browser that can be run headlessly, which is going to be important for keeping our script quick to run and everything like that. Okay, we've now got Puppeteer and Chromium installed. Let's get started with writing our script. So I'm going to open up a Sublime text editor, and I'm going to name my script. It'll just be a JavaScript file. I'll call it rain.js. I'm going to need some help from the documentation on this, so I'm going to bring that side by side. And I should probably open up the documentation. There's our install, and they have their API page, which we'll go to. But first, I'm going to copy this example because it's a really good starting point for us. So I've got the API here. I'm going to paste that example in. Now on this, it goes to example.com and takes a screenshot of the page. We actually don't want to go to that. We want to go to our CocoRAS page. So I'm going to copy that over. And it's not actually going to be this URL, but I am going to save it for later because I do want it later. It's going to be the login page. So I need to go to the logout and then hit login again. And that is the page I'm going to want to go to. There we go. What I can do right now is I'm just going to go to that page and take a screenshot and close it and just make sure that Puppeteer is all set up. So I'll save, jump back into my terminal, and run the script by doing node rain.js. And it's run, and you don't see any really output because there's nothing to have outputted. We are going to be able to see this screenshot. So let's take a look at that. So here's that package with my rain script, and if I open up this, you can see that is the login page that I was hoping for. So the first thing we need to do now is to enter text into this username, which is my username, and then my password. Won't worry about clicking save login because it's not going to be saved from time to time because I do believe the cookies are cleared every single time that you start up a new Puppeteer session. So it's not going to save anyway. But we are going to click login. Once we get to login, we can enter the form. But right now we just want to focus on entering text into this username and password. So if I wander over to the API documentation again, there are ways to get elements on the page. If we go into this page class, you'll notice the $ selector, $, which is pretty sure it's multiple elements. You can use XPath as well. And this is what I started off with, is using this $ selector. But I actually learned that it's not specifically necessary for single use items. So if you're just going to use an element once, you can actually just use that element directly through this page class. So I want to type into my text box. Well, there is a page.type command that takes the selector and text. If you've used WebDriver IO, this is actually pretty similar. It follows basically the same pattern. You would replace page with browser and browser.type, and instead of set value, you use type. But you pass in the selector, which is the same, and then the text you want to type. So we're actually going to copy that over, come into our page here, and I need to set my username, which is Kevin Lamping, and then I'm going to duplicate this for my password, which is my password. That's not actually my password. But before I move on to typing in my actual password, I need to update this selector to match the inputs that I actually want to type into. So I'm going to come back to my page and I'm going to inspect. Okay, I've got that set up now. Here is the ID that I'll use, text username. So I'll copy that, come back over here, use an ID selector via CSS, and then I'm going to do the same thing for the password. So I'll do the inspect again. It also has an ID on it. IDs are very useful for automation. And I'll paste that in. And then I'll need to click this login button. So yay, the login button has an ID on it as well. So now I can do page.click. Ooh, misspelled page. Page.click. And I pass in the selector that I want to click. And then let's go ahead and scroll down here. And we're going, or not scroll down, move that down. And we're going to take a screenshot of the page after we hit the login, just to make sure that the input on this worked. Save, come back over to my terminal and run. And the test ran. And if I go back to my example, it'll be a new example. And it says username is required. So it didn't actually type that in. How strange that it didn't do that. And the password seems off too. That is really weird. Okay, so I figured out what I did wrong, and that is I need to await these items. Await is a keyword. See this async and await. Page.type actually returns a promise that we need to wait on before it resolves, because it has to actually go do the action. So if we don't await it, it will try and do the action, and then it'll go immediately before waiting for the action to complete. It'll go immediately to the next one and try and do that and all that kind of stuff. So that's why it didn't enter any text in here, and that password is too short for what I wanted to type. So instead I need to use this await keyword. The reason that I forgot about it is that WebDriver IO kind of handles this for you. It basically assumes any browser command you're going to call, you're going to want to wait on. So it has this neat little wrapper around that means that you don't have to type await all the time. But in Puppeteer, you do need to type await all the time. And that's one of the reasons that I actually like WebDriver IO over Puppeteer for more advanced browser automation, is the fact that it kind of handles that for you. It makes the development experience a lot simpler. Regardless, I'll add that other await in there, and then I'll save and run again. And now I get the error that I was expecting, which is invalid username or password provided, because this is not actually my password. Let me go and do a quick thing to have my correct password in there, but not actually show you my password, because I don't really want you to know my password, because then you'll say that I've got 80 inches of rain last night, and that's just incorrect. Okay, so now I've updated this script to use a environmental variable where I hide my very secret password away from your prying eyes. And now my example, you see it's got the password in there and the login button is grayed out. It hasn't actually taken me to the next page. We're going to use a little bit of a trick in Puppeteer to allow us to go to that next page. And I've got to find where it is, so give me just 1 second. Okay, it's this page.wait for navigation. So basically, what it does is it will create a promise that will resolve once the page has navigated. So it's a neat little trick that I kind of like, where we say wait until the page has navigated. So this is going to see what the current URL is, and then it will resolve once the URL has changed. And what's going to change it is this page click action. So I already have that page click action here. I just need to wrap it around this promise.all. Promise.all, if you're not familiar with it, is a function that takes multiple promises and will resolve once all of those promises have either all resolved or one of them has been rejected. So here we're going to have 2 promises that we're waiting for. We're waiting for the click action to complete, and then we're waiting for this navigation to return. So I'll copy this over, and I can actually get rid of that await, paste that in. And now if I save and run my script again, if I come back here, now you see the screenshot has been updated to be this input form, which is what I wanted. Okay, so now it comes time to enter text into this form. And one thing that's important is I can't just type in here, because what Chromium or what Puppeteer is going to do, it's going to click on there and then it's going to start typing. And you see that it adds 30 inches instead of 3 inches. So what I really need to do is clear that input. Now there's a couple different ways you can do this. The one that I found works really well is to triple click 1, 2, 3. That selects all the text, and then no matter what I type, it's going to delete the current text in there. So to do that, we're going to get a reference to the element that we want to click 3 times, click it 3 times, and then send the text in there. So I'm going to get the ID of this input, which is this really long complex thing. Then I'm going to use that $sign function that I mentioned to store the reference to this element. So I'll say constant rain input is equal to page.$, and then that ID selector. Now I can do rain input dot click, and I'm going to pass in an object that's going to define some properties of this click. Property I care about is click count. I'm going to set that click count to 3. So this is going to click on that input form 3 times, which essentially will highlight any text in there and mean that when I start typing, it's going to delete that text. I did look for a clear command, like a text input clear command. I didn't find anything. This was the best that I could find. Oh, one thing that I forgot to do is add the await to my inputs, or to my commands. Now I'm going to await my rain input dot type. And my amount, I'll just put 0.3 just to try it out. Then I'm going to save this and run my command again. And it's run. And that's strange. It didn't actually send the text into there. Now I have to figure out why. Well, after trying it out a couple times, I don't know, maybe that screenshot was just out of date, but I kept it the exact same and now it's working. I really think that the screenshot just didn't refresh for some reason. But if I run this again, now it works just fine. I actually don't need this URL. I thought I did, but it navigates to the page that I want to enter my report to. So I think that's just an automatic navigation on the website side of things. So that's pretty nice. If I did want to go to a different page, I could just use this await.goto or await.page or await page goto. Golly, I can't get that right. And pass in the URL that I want. So the last thing I need to do is click the submit button, and that's pretty much the same thing as that page.click. So I will copy that ID over and just do await. I keep getting it wrong. Page click, and then I'll pass in the ID of that button. And really, let's see, if I hit submit, it doesn't change the URL, so I don't think I could use this wait for navigation. It is going to say that a report already exists because I've already entered a report, which is actually good for me because I don't want to save this. I just want to use it for testing right now. But I'll just go with page.click, and I will save this file, and let's see if we get this error to show up with our type. And we do get the error to show up, and you see it's 0.3. So it has fully completed everything. So one thing I could do at this point is add some more script to check if this error shows. If an error does show, I could have it log out. If not, if it's like a success message, I could actually have it say the success message. But I don't want to really get into that because it's more work than I really want to put into this script right now. So instead, I'm just going to say console.log rainfall submitted. Yay. And that way I just kind of know that it went through everything. Now there is one more thing I want to do to make this script a little bit easier to use, and that is be able to send the amount that I want to input from the command line myself. So I want to say node rain.js plus 0.03 or whatever that amount is. Right now, you'd have to manually update this text, and that would be annoying to have to do every single time you want to run it, and could make it really unusable if you want to make this a little bit more flexible. So what I'm going to do is use the process.argv variable that exists on all node commands, and let me bring up the Stack Overflow page that kind of explains that so that you can see in a little bit clearer terms what I'm talking about. So there's quite a few different answers out there, but this is the best one that I found really quickly. Basically, it shows argv takes the arguments that are passed in when you run your script. So 0 is equal to the first one, which is node, 1, the second, which is the script that you want to run, and then your arguments here go 2, 3, 4. So the one that we want is the one on the second index, which is going to be the actual argument place. So I'm going to copy this over, come back to my script, and say constant amount is equal to that value. I also want to add a little bit here to say if you didn't enter an amount, it should give you an error and quit the script so it doesn't try to log in and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to say if no amount, or if that amount is not a float, and I'm just going to use is not a number to parse through that. Then I'm going to do an error message, which I'm not actually sure there's a difference between console log and console error, but maybe. And I'll say please enter an amount as an argument. And really that should be please enter a numeric amount as an argument. And then if it comes here, I'm going to use process.exit and use a non-zero status code, so a 1 in this case. And this is going to make Node quit the entire process and not run anything else. Then I'll copy this amount and paste it down here, save this file. So now, if I try to run without an amount, it quits and says please enter a numeric amount, or a non-number, it'll say that. But if I come in here and I say 2, say I got 2 inches of rain, which would be a fair amount, it says rainfall submitted. And then if I jump back over to my screenshot, you see it says it's already existed, but it does have that 2 inches in there. So that is the entirety of my script. I did mention headless mode. I think if I do this, it should work. Headless is equal to false. We should actually see it run, pop up a browser. There it goes. You see it loads up and tries to submit, and it's done. So that'll be useful for debugging, is to be able to see that come through. So that's if you want to run it outside of headless mode, so it actually shows on the page. But headless mode is preferred mainly because it's a bit quicker. It doesn't have to go through all the process of starting up a visual browser. It just all runs behind the scenes. So that's Puppeteer. It's a really neat little technology, especially useful for running quick tests or automation scripts. You could use it for all sorts of data entry, mainly for things that don't have APIs. If this had an API, it would actually be a lot quicker just to use the API to send that stuff. They might actually have it. They don't, from what I've seen, they don't advertise it. So as a fallback, I can just do this through a Node script, and it runs pretty darn quickly. Since a lot of my videos cover WebDriver I/O testing, I can see the question being, should I use this over WebDriver I/O or should I stick with WebDriver I/O? And truthfully, the best answer is it depends. It depends on what your purpose is. It depends on how big of a script you're trying to write. If you're trying to set up a quick test and you want to just keep things simple, Puppeteer is a great option because you don't have to worry about what test framework to use or setting up Selenium or anything like that. It's just all simple. It's a quick install. The tests run really quick. You're only testing in Chrome, things like that. If you're looking to write a full set of test automation for a full website, I'd probably go with WebDriver I/O. One thing, you don't have to type await all the time. It handles navigation a little bit cleaner. It's got a few more bits of functionality, and the amount of integrations it has with tools like Sauce Labs or BrowserStack or Applitools, all sorts of great stuff. Actually, I do think Puppeteer does have an Applitools integration, so I should take that back. But they probably don't have Sauce Labs. I don't really know. I'm kind of just making things up. Check that out for yourself. But I still would recommend WebDriver I/O for larger scale test automation. Now, running through a simple form entry, I would definitely recommend Puppeteer because it's just so simple and it's going to run quickly. You don't have to worry about setting up all that extra stuff. So it just depends on what your needs are. If you're going to be testing Chrome extensions, I'd probably recommend checking out Puppeteer instead, trying to use that first, because it is so ingrained in the Chrome ecosystem. It's probably going to have a lot better support than something like WebDriver may have. I actually haven't used WebDriver for testing Chrome extensions, and I haven't used Puppeteer for testing Chrome extensions, but my gut feeling is telling me that you would use Puppeteer in this case. So that's going to wrap up this video. If you've used Puppeteer, I'd love to hear about your experiences with it. Always interested in learning more about actual real-world experiences because there's lots of examples out there, but they don't always best represent how it's actually used in production cases. I guess not really production, but in real-world cases, they don't quite cover everything. They're just too simple to go through. That's why I kind of wanted to go through this one, is because it does get into that waiting for navigation and having to clear text input. That's not something that you might see in an example that just takes a screenshot of a page. So yeah, let me know in the comments if you have any other ideas for what you'd like me to cover. I'm always happy to hear that in the comments as well, and have a great one.